You are listening to the Take a Step podcast, where we help growth-minded young men live every day on purpose. My name is Josh Johnston, and in this episode, we've got myself and John Szarszewski recording our very first episode from our new in-person studio, which is still in the process of getting completed. But as we say, we take that step and we build from there. But today, we've got us two, and we're joined by Chase Frost out in Arizona. Chase is somebody who's an entrepreneur through and through in the personal development and leadership development world, where he works with leaders. He coaches individuals who are entrepreneurs, specifically fathers as well, on how to live more intentionally, both personally and professionally. And to be honest, we get a little vulnerable in this episode about where we're struggling in those areas and how we can take those steps to start to build a path to actually overcoming some of the challenges that we're experiencing. So if you're looking for an episode that's packed with authenticity, you're in the right spot. Hope you guys enjoy it. Let's take a step. Welcome back to the Take a Step podcast. My name is Josh Johnston. We've got John Szarszewski here again, and we have got Chase Frost joining us from out in Arizona. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Let's go, man. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm excited to chat with you guys.
Yeah, man. I know we've been scrambling over here, getting everything dialed in with our first actual recording in the in-person studio, which we're still putting things together. But hey, as we say, you find clarity through your actions. So we are clarifying what we did wrong and what to do better next time through getting it going, even though it's imperfect. But you should feel honored to be the very first guest on the in-person studio episode.
We feel super honored. Because you know what I love is like the map always appears when the car's in motion. I love the theme of the podcast, take a step. It's a perfect plan, and you plan yourself into doing nothing.
Yes, sir.
And if you're listening to this, buckle up, because Chase drops more truth bombs than anybody I've ever met, dude. He's one of my longtime friends, and dude, it is so good to have you on here and see you again, brother.
Well, I appreciate that. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, man. Well, let's get it kicked off. I'd love for you to just introduce yourself however you think it makes sense. Obviously we get a lot of guys who are, in their 20s and 30s, growth minded, who are, trying to figure out, hey, how can I pursue a little bit more purpose? I know there's something I feel called to. I feel like I'm a little stagnant in life right now. So, with that in mind, go ahead and introduce yourself however you think it makes sense.
Well, that's good. Well, I'm Chase Frost. I'm a dad. I'm also a husband, entrepreneur. Yeah, I just turned 40. Just hit the big 40 a couple months back, and so I'm just outside of that realm. But I've learned so much in this journey over the last 12, 13 years of personal development, personal growth, and there's so much hindsight that comes from getting a little older. When I was young and fiery, it was like, man, you guys are just old and stupid. And then life gets more complicated, or you're just old and lazy. And then, life hits you a little bit. And, looking at the steps I wish I would have taken when there was a lot less risk involved was kind of like, wow, it would have been really fun. So I'm excited to share. I'm super passionate about being a dad. I run a little group called Apex Dads. It's kind of a calling purpose piece for me. And I'm not really, making a bunch of money off of it. I find that when you mix the mission with your money, sometimes you lose the mission and focus on the money. And keeping it, step by step, throwing it at the appropriate rate, so I don't make the people in my group my entire livelihood.
Yeah, man, I love that. And one thing I'd love to jump into to get it kicked off, and I'm so happy you mentioned it, is a lot of guys early on in life, especially when they have this, they feel like they're called to build something for themselves in this world of entrepreneurship. And a lot of guys feel like, I'll do it when it makes more sense, or I'll do it when there's less risk. And like from what you just said a second ago, it's like you wish you would have taken some of those steps when there was a little bit less risk, because something I always say is that there's never going to be less risk than right now. Responsibility only increases. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, like when you say that, what were you thinking at the time? And like, what would you tell that version of yourself that wanted to take that jump, wanted to take that step, if you could have a conversation with them today?
Well, it wouldn't have needed to be a jump. It would have just been do something. Like the first time I held my son in my arms, like I felt this pull towards fatherhood. It was insane. Like it was a long birth. I was irate. I was belligerent. Like the hospital screwed up a whole bunch of stuff. And the first time I held him and looked at him, like I knew I was changed forever. And I never felt like I really felt that passion from people about being a dad. Some of the stuff that I've heard is like, wait as long as you can, take your time. You can't put them back. And like, I'm looking at this kid for the first time, like, why would anybody ever say that to me? That's when I first felt like the pull to talk about like fatherhood and being a great dad and being connected with your kids and intentionally, raising them in, to be confident, faithful, and, competent. And so it kind of hit me in the chest. And John knows my story on this a little bit, where it's like I've kind of ran from it. I'll do it later. I'll do it when I got my money right. I'll do it when my kids are a little older. I'll do it when, this happens, or, I'll wait till this milestone. And that milestone's not going to come. If you feel a calling, like I've literally, since that call took place, I've kind of felt like Jonah and the whale. Like, hey, you've been called to Nineveh and you're stuck right here until you're ready to go. Whenever I've moved in that direction, it seems to work. So just take that step. It doesn't need to be this big giant leap into the void. If you have it, like, work on an hour a day, work on 2 hours a day, invite someone, do something, start a podcast, whatever it is, that moves you one step closer. And it could even be in like not the perfect direction. Hopefully it's not. Like that'll teach you what you need to know. But once you feel like that calling in that pull, you're never going to get rid of it.
That's so accurate, because it's like, so a lot of guys feel like in order to do something, they need to know every step of the process that's going to get them to the destination. And what you just said, it's like, it's not a jump. It's what is the next step. And what I just said at the beginning of the show is finding clarity through actions. I've had conversations with so many people. One, I refer back to where I first kind of had this idea of, hey, it's not having the perfect plan then going, it's clarity through actions. It was a podcast I had with the founder of an organization called Live 2540, who works out at the gym, and awesome guy. But he has this organization that serves, I believe it's 39,000 kids in Liberia today. And when he first started, it was like almost 20 years ago. It started with 50 kids that were like right in front of him. And he had this passion and this purpose, and he didn't know what it looked like. And I asked him, I'm like, so when you first had these 50 kids that you wanted to have an impact on, did you have this vision of something you wanted to build? And he was like, absolutely not. I knew that I felt like I wanted to serve these kids. And through taking the consistent steps along the past 20 years, God has just opened up the path and made everything more clear one step at a time. So it's so accurate. And I love that that's part of your story in this world of entrepreneurship. And I think that's an inspiration to so many kids today.
And I love how you brought up Jonah. I've been studying that right now. I'm like doing a 4-week deep dive into Jonah. And so often I hear people, they're like, yeah, man, I'm in a storm right now. It's like, yeah, God probably sent that storm to get you back on track to the path that he wants for you, dude. Like, you're not stepping into your calling. So he's going to pull you there one way or another.
I kind of feel, I've said this before, like once you're called, you're cursed. Like, unless you accept the call, it's not gonna work, like, and it doesn't need to be like, oh, I need to dedicate my life to kids in Liberia. It's like, no, I need to do something in that direction. I need to listen to that little part of me that says, hey, you need to do this. You need to move forward.
Yeah. And that, I love that you just said that. Once you're called, you're cursed, because there's a healthy aspect to that, and then there's an unhealthy aspect to that. And I wanted to dive into this conversation, and me and John were actually talking about this before the show, because that curse, and I know you do a lot with dads and how they show up with their family, with their wife and with their kids. And that curse can sometimes be a detriment, where it's like we're so driven to feel like we want to pursue this calling with 100% of every ounce of energy we got. And oftentimes that leads from pulling away from other areas of our life. And for me personally, like one of my biggest struggles, which came up literally last night, and I'm so happy we're having this show today, because last night, one of those conversations with my wife was, hey, like, why can't I show up with the same level of intentionality to our family, to our marriage, to what we're doing at home as I am with my business, right? And I think a lot of guys will resonate with that. So for you, like, how have you seen the curse play out to the detriment of other guys, whether if it's you personally or people that you work with?
Yeah, well, I personally think it's easier to show up at work. It's a game. Like at home, it's your legacy. It's triggering. And when you're home, when you're at work, you're thinking about your house, and when you're at house, you're thinking about work. There's all these things coming down. There's the stress, there's the finances, there's all these other things that you're pursuing. And when you're at home, it's really easy for your family to feel like a burden. And like that's when we start getting into like addiction cycles. That's when we start getting into like, numbing, whether it's like on the phone or, I'll do 10 minutes or 15 minutes and so forth. So I really like and then when the kids are being turds, right? Like, which happens, right? Sometimes they're just turds, and like if you're expecting your kids to listen to you all the time, you're going to have a rough time. They're supposed to not listen to you. They're supposed to find where the boundaries are. You're supposed to, show them. So I have things that I use to kind of like guide my home. I have rules that like they're principles that I'm teaching them and I'm ingraining in them. So when those situations come up, it's a lot easier for me to focus on the principle and not get in a fight with an 8-year-old about eating his chicken, or a 5-year-old about what time we had to turn off the Nintendo and when we have to stop playing Zelda. It's like, nope. So I really try to, embed those principles in all of my actions, interactions with my kids. That helps me focus on fighting for principle and not against my child, right? And so when we look at like our businesses, we always have like core values. Here's what we do. Here's what we stand for. Do we have that in our home? We don't quite have the same framework in our house that we manage in our business life. In our business life, there's metrics, there's things that we're doing, what we're hitting, there's our goals. In our home, it's kind of like it's easy to let it just like survive to the end of the day and be a good enough dad. And we all struggle with that. I mean, I'm not perfect at this. But one of the things in my group that I talk about is, look, I'm going to screw this up and I'm going to let you watch. Like, I'm not gonna hide. I'm not going to pull punches. I'm not going to pretend like I didn't lose my head with my kids last night. That I had a perfect bedtime every night. No, I just have. You know, people need to know. I think lots of times you get hooked on Instagram and all these people showing how good they are at all this stuff, and it's like, no, you're seeing like the highlight reel. Like it's weird being like the coaching dads when I can see all of my flaws and like I'm not going to pretend like I'm better than I am. That's just disingenuous.
That's so good. I really want to stick on this point throughout the core part of the show, because I think it's something that a lot of guys will acknowledge. Like a lot of the stuff you're saying, they'll probably resonate with and be like, yeah, I feel that. That's so true in my life. Like acknowledging it is a massive first step, but like what do we do? How do we apply something in order to actually make a difference where we can show up in a much larger capacity without taking away from the intentionality we want to show up in what we're building in the world of entrepreneurship? Like based on what you just said, like what are some good action steps that I could take and apply with my life, personally and professionally?
So when I'm at my best, right, it's a practice. I look at fatherhood as a practice. I'm practicing. Like this isn't a perfect, like I'm practicing this stuff. I'm practicing the principles. So when I'm having a good practice, like I'm going to clear off before I get in the house. Like I'm going to like literally flush the day. Like it's all done. It's all finished. It's all complete, right? I'm going to flush the business of the day and like do some breath work, do some meditation, do some prayer, kind of reset myself before I get into the family to make sure that I'm as present as I can possibly be. And that's like that's a huge thing. And the other thing that I find to be super beneficial is just planning. When we have a bunch of stuff floating around in our head, like all the open loops, it's very hard to be fully present. But if I know when I'm going to tackle this thing, and when I know when I'm going to deal with that problem, it's a lot easier to just like ship it, right? To let it go.
Mm.
And if we haven't planned and we don't clear off, when we get home, we're bringing that chaotic, conquer the world energy to our house. And we're not there to conquer our kids. We're there to, they're our stewardship, right? We don't need to break them. We need to unleash them.
Dude, this is hitting hard right now because that growth-minded energy that I've been carrying with me and all that I'm doing, I take it home. And my wife, who's stay-at-home mom and like she's homeschooling her kids and she's kind of leading the home front. I come in and I still see projects that we can work on. And she just wants affirmation. So like, hey, recognize all the work that I'm doing, but I'm looking at how can we fine tune? How can we get better? So I've dropped the ball, man. I have like for the last, I don't know how many months, I haven't been explaining how grateful I am for all the things she's doing. And instead I'm constantly looking at things that we could fine tune and get better at.
Yeah. And that's conquer, that's the businessman, right? How do we optimize? How do we optimize? How do we optimize? Tell me what you experienced over the last couple months.
Yeah, well, I've been falling short on that. So last night, my head hits a pillow, and that's when she wants to talk. So she didn't get me my best self, but like I took it. I took it like a man because she was right on everything that she said. And I do need to express my gratitude. And I used to look for things to be grateful for. And it would almost be like a checkbox. Like every day I had to compliment her or tell her one thing that I saw that she did that I was proud of. And I've gone away from that. And that was the standard that I set. So now that I've walked away from it, she's like, hey, dude, like, where's the husband that I had who was constantly uplifting me and like, making me feel how seen I am. And I got a lot of work to do on that side. So
I think we all do, and that's why I look at it as a practice because it's really easy to get in your head and feel bad. But feeling bad does not produce benefit. We can't do stuff from a place of shame. Like I'm practicing being a husband. Like I'm practicing who I'm being because you can make that gratitude text a checkbox and like, oh yeah, I got to do this, blah. But like, who am I being when I say that? What am I practicing? How intentional am I? How serious am I in this moment?
That's the cool thing with goal setting, though, is when you make it a checkbox, it might be a KPI. Like my husband KPI is to compliment my wife every day. But as I look for that, then all of a sudden the heart posture starts to change and becomes my new operating system. Where like now subconsciously, I'm just looking for ways to like tell her how amazing she is. So sometimes we need those checklists in order to get the heart posture right.
It's the same thing with like someone who's trying to get into, making diving into the word their morning practice. It's like you never want reading the Bible in the morning to be just a box that you check, but sometimes it has to start with that in order for it to become your natural rhythm and routine. So it's not doing it for that purpose, but it's doing it so that you can create the habit, and the habit becomes your typical system. And something that you're talking about, which I love, like on this idea of like it's a practice, is it like the mission statement that we have behind Take a Step is to redefine the way we view success by shifting our focus from the destination to the process, and actually realizing that it is the process itself that if we can find fulfillment in that rather than when and if we get to a certain point, then that's where we're going to actually experience true purpose and be able to experience that fulfillment on a daily basis. And it's the same mindset that applies to success versus, how we're moving our marriage forward, how we're propelling our family forward, realizing that, hey, I'm not trying to conquer, like you're saying. I'm not trying to win something. I'm not trying to get to the podium. I'm trying to have this ever evolving process, this practice of, figuring out what works, failing, adjusting, figuring out what works, and having that be the constant process, because that's where growth really happens. That's what's actually going to generate the results that we want.
Absolutely. And like, I have a little brother, he coaches athletes, like Olympic athletes, college athletes, high school athletes. He coaches them a lot. And one of the things that he focuses on is like effort and intention are way more important than results. If everybody's just looking for the win and the loss, like he coaches a lot of wrestlers. That's my family's a wrestling family. And like they're focusing on the win, but sometimes they can win a match and wrestle horribly. Right? What was your intention? What was your effort? What does it look like? Sometimes they can wrestle a great match and lose. That's not like, and then they feel horrible, right? But that's not necessarily the piece. Effort and intention are way more important than results. And if we stick to that frame, that's when people grow the most. If we're focusing on the results, like, hey, I want to get laid, I'm going to clean the house, do the dishes, put the kids down, blah, 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 blah. That's my end result. But you got stink all over you.
Yeah, I think about like when you talk about the difference between not glorifying the win or the loss, but the effort. I'd love to hear. I can assume I know your opinion, but when it comes to the generation that's been built up, it all goes back to how were they educated growing up? Like, what was that mindset that was instilled in them? And in my opinion, it goes back to our education system and saying, hey, if you pass, great job. If you fail, horrible job. There's something wrong with you. But we never looked at, hey, what no one monitors what led up to it. You're expected to, hey, figure it out on your own. Everything that matters is what happened on the test. And in my opinion, that's led to a generation of people who are terrified to take risks, like we were talking about at the beginning, because they feel like if they fail, then they're going to get demonized for, something's wrong with them. They didn't do anything right. That's like failure is bad, essentially. But and when we talk about, hey, it's all in the process. Hey, if you look at any journey, if you're trying to climb a mountain, There's going to be peaks, there's going to be valleys. And once you hit those valleys, that's where you learn the most about how to actually continue to get better so you can climb the mountain higher and higher.
Yeah, and I love that. I completely agree, and I look at it like this as well. Um, everything that we do, like every piece of effort, is kind of like a sacrifice, right? We're putting something on the table. It's not our job to worry about the result. That's not in our hands. And when we do, sometimes we'll get that result, and like it doesn't fulfill us, right? Because every step is a win. Every move forward is a win. Like that's just what it is. If we're moving forward, we're moving in that direction. That's the win. If we're only looking at the outcome as like going to like fill our hearts and minds, like that's not. I mean, I've hit plenty of goals, and after I hit it, I was like, well, what's next? Let's go conquer something else, right? And I know a ton of people that are in the same boat. Oh, I did 1 million. Now I want to do 2. Now I want to do 5. Now I want to do 10. Like that's all well and good, but if we can't enjoy the journey, and if we have to light our families on fire to make it happen, then like, who cares?
Yeah. And James Clear talks about that in Atomic Habits, where he talks about, hey, it's better to focus on the system rather than the goal, because one of the points to that is if you place your fulfillment in reaching a destination, you get closer and closer to that destination throughout the process. And then once you get there, it's not as glamorous as what you once thought it would be, because you're already focused on what's next. So if you're focused on that journey rather than actually getting to the point, which is going to leave you unfulfilled, then that's where you know you're in a good spot. And I think, in my opinion, that's where people need to realize that, hey, you don't need to wait until you're 40, 50, 60 years old and retire and you are, quote, now living this successful life. It's actually a lot closer than you might imagine, because you could experience it on a daily basis if you're finding fulfillment in those steps like you're talking about.
Yep. And I think the fear of criticism is the reason why most people don't start. They don't want to look stupid. They don't want to look stupid if it doesn't blow up right away. They don't want to look stupid when they don't want to be small. They want to be big overnight. They want investors. They want this. They want that. That can work. But at the end of the day, like it's the fear of criticism of their peers or their family or whoever. Or they're just afraid to be judged or afraid to look stupid. And like go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, all that fear is based on is what they feel, what they perceive as that other person's definition of success is. Like if I'm trying to build my life and I want to get to a certain point, but I'm making decisions based off what I think he or she thinks is right, then I'm going to get to a point. Let's just say I base everything off of their opinions and I work everything to a T and perfect the process. I'm still going to be unfulfilled because I built their dream life, or my perception of their dream life, and not even my own. And it's this whole mindset of like, if you try to pave, or if you try to walk down everyone else's path, you're never going to pave your own. And what that means is, first I have to identify what my path is. Like, what is your definition of success? And that's where it gets back to the conversation of like, is it in the process or is it a destination? And then once I have that definition, now it's, hey, if like you're going to have to realize that you're building your future and not someone else's future. And if that's the case, you got to make decisions that might ruffle some feathers, might face some judgment, but who cares, because I'm building my life, not yours.
Yeah, and you have to sit in the slot when you do fail, because you're going to take some licks. In entrepreneurship, whenever you do stuff, things aren't going to work out the way you thought they would. Like every entrepreneur I've talked to, and I've been able to talk literally thousands of them over like the last 15 years that I've spent knee to knee with entrepreneurs, and like every single one of them has a story of like big L's. Like who are you when you take an L? And sometimes we decide not to even step in. It's the reason why like combat sports are tough, because you're going to take some licks. Nobody's walking into jiu-jitsu manhandling anybody, right? You're going to look stupid. You're going to feel dumb, and it's commitment to the process and the practice that's going to really move the needle forward. And can we stay practicing when we're injured? Can we stay moving after we lose? Can we take the heat? And there'll be seasons where it might feel like you can't, but that's when you get to rebuild who you are.
So good. Do you have a vivid memory for you where you can recall one of those L's in your the last 10, 15 years?
I've taken some L's. I started a business right after my first son was born, and about 2.5 years later, when my second son was being born, my oldest son was diagnosed with autism. 2 days later, my second son was born, and then 2 weeks later, the business that I put savings through and all that, like, it gave me the boot. So I got two kids. One of them was just diagnosed with autism, no source of income. And, COVID hits 2 months later. And I'm sitting here like, oh my goodness, where do I go? Can't get my
Mm.
kids, don't know what's going on. I had a big job lined up, few $100,000 a year and like in the mortgage industry. And they're like, hey, all this stuff's kind of crazy. Let's hold off for a little bit. And I got to figure it out and start a new business from scratch and then go from there. So that was like a really difficult piece. And then later on, I started another business, a software company, invested a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of stuff. And that one didn't pan out either, 6 figures in and taken out there, right? We should have gotten funding. We should have gone around and gotten investors. And, we decided to go slow and everybody else who got money, like they went faster and now they're $100 million companies.
That's so good. And I know so many guys personally that will relate to that. And it's real, it's authentic. And a lot of guys try to run from it, but like that running from it only leads you down the path further because you're going to face it at some point. Like you either choose hard now or you'll be forced into it later. Either way, The hard times are inevitable.
Well, and I'm not saying it would be like a huge group or anything like that, but I would at least been in alignment and acting from a place of purpose instead of running from the purpose, right? It doesn't mean my life would be like infinitely better, but I'd be infinitely better.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd at least been in Nineveh.
Yeah. I want to respect your time, and I know we need to wrap up here shortly, but one thing I'd love to ask, because you just brought it up when it comes into like living into your purpose and what you feel like you've been called to do is, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, a lot of guys feel stuck. A lot of guys are stagnant, feel like, waking up every day, going through the motions because they feel like they don't really have a way out. A lot of it has to do with like the fear of being able to take the risk, face the judgment, like we're talking about, or what their definition of success is. But for like, if you had one thing to say to somebody who does feel stuck, somebody who does feel like, they're waking up today and it's just, on the hamster wheel again, going through the motions, what would you say to somebody to say, hey, this is your first step, if you choose to take it, that will lead to a life of more purpose every single day?
So I really think like leaning into the skid, right? Whatever you're afraid of, typically when people are doing that, they're numb. They're not being challenged, they're bored, they're frustrated. That's kind of a danger zone as well. That's when people start getting into like different addictions with alcohol, porn, weed, social media, whatever. Like if you're waking up and you're feeling that drag, like that's a danger zone. Like you're gonna end up feeding those things. And I think most men have struggled with like at least one of those things from time to time. Everybody struggled with addiction, sedation, like, and that's where the shame comes in and the frustration. So I'm a big fan of like, how do we break the rhythm? Is it a fast? Is it our rhythm is depression and frustration and like not feeling fulfilled. Like, what do I have to do to break the rhythm? Is it go to an event? Is it do like a men's retreat? Is it, what do I have to do to break the rhythm and it's like have a fresh view? And then after that, capitalize on it. Because lots of times we look at that as the destination. I feel really good. And then 2 months later, we're kind of back in the same spot. It doesn't fix anything. But how do I create a new habit from that point? Or make it super simple. Create one habit that sucks.
I think that's why I became such a psychopath about running, is because growing up playing baseball, you only ever run 90 feet. Anytime you ran more than that, it was almost always for punishment. And I get out of college. I'm like, I'm just I think I was training for a 5K. One of my buddies asked me if I wanted to run, and I started doing it in the mornings, and I dreaded it every single morning. And then the mindset after like 2 or 3 months of doing it consistently, after the race, I felt like something was missing, like mentally and how I started my day. And I'm like, maybe there's something to that. And the more I did it, the more I've continued to tap into what's hard, from doing a 5K, 10K, ran my first marathon. Now I ran an ultra 2 years ago. Now I've got John training for his first ultra. And,
I'm still chasing that runner's high. You guys keep talking about it. I'm like, dude, I'm just in the pit every time I get out there on my feet. I'm like, dude, this is horrible. Dude, maybe that's the point.
If you hate running, you just have not been doing it long enough. That's my message.
Guess.
That's my message.
And you gotta celebrate yourself on that thing as well. I just did this recently. So I joined a challenge called Ruck 90. You have to ruck 100 miles in 90 days and you can't miss more than 7 days or whatever. And through the holidays, I got myself behind. And in the last 3 days before the new year, I had to ruck 26 miles. And it was like cathartic. It was like a full at 40 pounds, running through. I still can't feel my finger. I might have done something weird, a little stinger action there. But like either way, like it was a huge rhythm breaker for me where it's like, hey, I did something hard. I didn't have to. New Year's Eve, I rushed 14 miles because I said that I would. And it was a good fresh start on like a new place to go from. So I believe in breaking that rhythm and taking like at least one step forward, because it comes down to our habits and our systems. And sometimes once we know it works, we stop doing it and get lazy anyway. Oh, let me put that tool in my belt. Let me put that tool in my belt. I know this. I'll do that when I feel the urgency. I don't feel it right now. And it's being like in battle with the boring that really makes it happen. Like if you're waiting until you want to do it, like you're going to be waiting until that pit hits, and then you'll really want to do it because we'll get really intense and back ourselves out of a corner. But it's just those consistent little pieces that we're doing.
Yeah. Amen, dude.
There's a big thing with that. And we've talked about this before, but if you get so good at the process and you fall in love with the process, but you haven't done the internal work on yourself to realize that you're capable and you're worthy of more, sometimes you'll put yourself subconsciously into a pit just because you know how to climb out of it. But then once you climb out of it, you're like, okay, there's new levels ahead of me that I don't like. So let me get back into this pit again. You'll self-destruct. Yeah, you're comfortable back, and then all of a sudden you got to climb back out. And all you do is this up and down, this roller coaster ride, and you're never progressing to new levels.
I've done that 50 times. Like that's hey, I'm really good against the wall, but after I'm off the wall, like, do I maintain consistency or do I let off the gas just enough? Like I'll maintain some level of consistency, but not like the levels that happen when I'm against the wall, right? When it's like I'm up at 4, I'm moving, I'm working, I'm meditating. And like after you get off the wall, it's like, maybe I'll just do a little meditation and a little workout and this, that, and the other. So it's finding a way to go from being motivated by shame and feeling unworthy to prove that you're worthy to like, I'm motivated because I believe in God and he believes in me. And like, I'm motivated by love and legacy as opposed to shame and unworthiness and, avoiding sin. Right.
So good, dude. Well, Chase, man, it's been awesome having you on the show, and like we definitely got to do this again sometime. Before we let you go, if somebody listening wants to follow along with what you're doing and continue to soak up some of the incredible wisdom that you've shared so far this show, where can they find you?
Instagram's the best place. The Impossible Chase is my handle. I don't post a lot because it takes a lot of time, but like that's how you get in contact with me, and like that's how we roll. So Instagram's
Awesome,
the place to find me, and website's coming up here in the next couple weeks because I have time. Just lit everything on fire again. So here we go.
I love it, man. Well, cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for jumping on the show. It's been an awesome conversation, and hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have.
I have. It's been great. Thank you so much for having me. We will have to do it again, get some more time in this thing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, guys, thanks for listening to another episode of the Take a Step podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave a rating on whichever platform you're listening. And always remember that no matter where you are on your growth journey, every mile begins with a step. We'll talk to you in the next episode.